This is Fowl Players Radio, your podcast for arts, entertainment, and pop culture. Welcome. My name is Michael Spedden, your host. Every episode features fun, fascinating stories about people in the performing arts, actors, authors, dancers, writers, musicians, athletes, you name it. Folks who are center stage, backstage, on camera, or behind the scenes. Sit back and listen. Let's have some fun. Fowl Players Radio is a proud production of the Fowl Players Group and the official podcast of the Fowl Players of Perryville.
Hello, my name is Gunhild Carling, and you are listening to Fowl Players Radio, and I am interviewed here, so tune in.
Hi, this is Paul Castiglia, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio, the one-stop shop for all your pop culture needs.
Hi, this is Bud Becker, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio.
Hi, this is Kim of Kim's Crypt, and you're listening to Fowl Players Radio.
Hey folks, Michael Spedden here. We just re-released our episode with Bruce Vilanch. It was season 5, episode 50. It originally aired on September 15th of 2020. Bruce Vilanch has accomplished so much. He's really had a great career, and he was a great interview. He told me all about his career starting back in the 70s, writing for the Donny and Marie Show. He was also a writer on the Star Wars Special, the Paul Lynde Halloween Special, the Brady Bunch Variety Specials. He also wrote for Red Foxx and Bette Midler, and he was also on Hollywood Squares for quite a while. As an actor, we know him from Bosom Buddies. He was on Bosom Buddies, as well as the touring and Broadway companies of Hairspray, playing Edna Turnblad. He had a great time with that, and he told us all about it. He also was, for many years, a writer for the Oscars, the Emmys, and the Tonys, and he's won 6 Emmy Awards himself. Guys, this is a great episode. Bruce was a very gracious guest, and I really enjoyed talking to him. www.fowlplayersradio.com or on our new YouTube channel, Fowl Players Radio on YouTube. Make sure you go there and hit that like and subscribe button. And we will see you next time. Enjoy the episode with Bruce Vilanch.
This is A.D. Adams, and you are tuned in to Fowl Players Radio with your host, Michael Spedden.
Yeah, hi, this is David Simmons from DC Star, and I am just encouraging all of you to tune in to Michael Spedden's show on Fowl Players Radio and love the rock and roll of the past and the art of the future.
So welcome to the show, Mr. Vilanch. Bruce, it's nice to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And being from Baltimore, being a Baltimore boy, one of the first things I'd like to ask you about here is your time in Hairspray. I know you were in the touring group as well as doing it on Broadway. Could you tell us about that a bit?
I actually did the tour first, and of course, we had to open in Baltimore.
Oh, of course.
Because it's Good Morning Baltimore.
Yes.
It's opening number. So we opened in Baltimore I think the last show at the Mechanic Theater,
Yes.
which was a fabled modern theater actually before they opened the Hippodrome, I guess, and all the shows moved. So it was kind of like they were packing up the theater as we were performing it. But it was pretty great because we had a big opening and everybody was there except ironically John Waters.
Is that right?
Who, of course, is, he and Edgar Allan Poe and Cal Ripken are Baltimore. And which is like every side of the spectrum, right? That indicates to you how bizarre the town is.
You don't have to tell me.
But John was shooting what turns out to be the last picture he shot. He hasn't done anything since. It was called A Dirty Shame.
Uh-huh.
And he had Tracy Ullman and Johnny Knox with him.
Mm-hmm.
And they were working. And part of the reason they were working was because a hurricane was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
It was September of 2004.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was Irene. There were a couple of Irenes, but it was one of those girls. And it blasted Baltimore, flooded the inner harbor. And we did the opening night, but then we canceled the next night because nobody could get anywhere.
Right.
However, the show did go on.
Yes.
But it was the one thing that happened in Baltimore that cracked us all up was, and John warned us. He'd come to rehearsals in New York,
Mm-hmm.
he said there are a couple of inside jokes that only Baltimore audiences will get.
Yep.
And you should be prepared. You'll get laughs in Baltimore and no place else. And it was true. Not just to get laughs, but they were like the names of high schools and various political personalities from the period.
Oh, yeah.
And in Baltimore, they got screams.
Mm-hmm.
Screams, stop the show. And then, of course, we went to the next town, which was Hartford, and it was, crickets.
Oh, yeah.
Dead silence.
Mm-hmm.
But so we had a huge party after the opening night, and the entire the original cast of Hairspray, of the movie Hairspray, was invited.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these Baltimore kids, who were of course now adults,
Mm-hmm.
showed up. And it was a lot of fun. I mean, to see, how they had all turned out. But unfortunately, John couldn't be there, and without the ringmaster, there really is no circus.
Right.
So we all got drunk, and that was fun. But but it was, it wasn't anything it could be. And we chalk it up to the weather. But I guess, right now it's an appropriate thing to say,
Mm-hmm.
because the weather's changing everything right now.
It sure is. I'll tell you.
It was cool, and we played a couple of weeks, and it was great. And then we moved on, and I did the tour for a year, and then I went to Broadway for a year, and I would go back if they'd let me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was quite a big thing down here in Baltimore because it was so much of our culture, and when he put that movie out, so many of us when it came out saw our parents and grandparents in it,
Right.
And the accents and like the references to the neighborhoods and the schools and everything were just so spot on. That was such a big part of our culture here. But
it was John's. It was John's first mainstream kind of movie. It moved him out of the real cult class into more of a mainstream, if you can ever say that he's mainstream.
Right.
And it was the one that kind of did that. And of course, the musical was such a hit. When they made the musical movie with John Travolta,
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to John Waters, and he said the most hysterical thing is they have to go to Toronto to shoot it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because Baltimore is too expensive.
That's what I had
He said,
heard.
I made 30 movies here for $1.98 a piece. And all of a sudden, I guess unions and whatever is going on in Maryland, suddenly it costs, the Canadians give you tax breaks and stuff. So it is cheaper in Toronto. So they had to recreate 1962 Baltimore in Toronto, which apparently was not that difficult.
Yeah. That's the thing. It was right after they stopped producing The Wire, I think, is when something changed around here and it didn't become as filmmaker company or film production friendly or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
But I'll tell you kind of a funny local story about Hairspray too. And this happened a lot. This happened quite a bit. My friend would always get a hoot out of it. I had a buddy that worked in a video store, and in the late 80s, when the original non-musical Hairspray came out, people would always get it. They'd take it home with the kids, put on the PJs, get out the popcorn, and watch Hairspray together. So then after they would return Hairspray, they would be looking around. Oh, honey, look, another John Waters movie. Pink Flamingos. Let's take this home and show it to the kids.
Let's watch her eat poodle shit. This is fun.
Oh boy. Yeah. Oh, the customer complaints that came back after that. I mean, people would come back in like, oh my God, I can't believe what was in this movie. And they're like, well, I think they kind of had to move it behind the counter after a while because of the people.
Nothing would make him happier.
I know, but people. Yeah,
he's uneasily in the mainstream.
Oh, he is.
And that may be one reason why he hasn't made a picture since Dirty Shame.
Yeah.
Because as he says very, very candidly, it's very hard to be outrageous anymore.
It is.
Especially with the freedoms that the 500 channel universe on television and all the streaming platforms allow, you can do pretty much anything. And what do you do that's really going to shock and enrage people? I used to work with George Carlin, and he had the same problem. He said, I used to be the one who shocked and stunned everybody, and now it's impossible to shock anybody.
That's the truth.
Because they've heard it all and seen it all, and everyone's allowed to do it. Anyway, he came up with a couple of novel things. I think John got tired of having to come up with stuff, and he just kind of became, he had a brand, and he began selling himself as his brand.
He did.
And so there were John Waters books and John Waters art exhibits and all that kind of stuff, and he's like John Waters now. I mean, he doesn't need to make movies. It's kind of like what Hitchcock became, except Hitchcock wouldn't stop doing movies.
Right.
That's all he really wanted to do. He was Alfred Hitchcock kind of as a sideline to promote the movies, but it wasn't like he wasn't a performer by nature.
Right.
John really loves to perform.
He does. He does stage shows around here.
He does. He used to tour with the Christmas show every year.
Yeah, he still does that here. Yeah.
Yeah, still does. He'll bring some new rock band like Peaches. I saw him with you some years ago. And then he does a stand-up show, which I've seen him do up in Provincetown. And listen, it's fabulous. Nobody's more unassuming than John, and he has gotten to realize his crazy vision and to get his subversive message across. One of the interesting things about Hairspray is that John will never let a woman play Edna Turnblad.
Right.
And that's part of the deal, because he's all about the subversiveness of the movie, that the audience knows that these are two men, but they have such a loving relationship that they forget that there are two men. And at the same time, the fat girl gets the hot guy, and there's an interracial relationship between two teenagers, which everybody finally approves of. And it's totally subversive. The audience walks out of there saying, "Oh, what a fun up world," and they've accepted all of these things, which go against the grain, or went against the grain back when there was a grain.
Oh yeah. And those were big issues back in the '60s too. I mean, that was when so my father was in high school around that time, and that was when the schools were starting to desegregate, and everybody had a million and one reasons why they shouldn't, and nonsense.
That's true. That's true. And it still is an issue on cruise ships, apparently, because they do Hairspray on Royal Caribbean, and they get lots of complaints.
Is that
and
right?
I think that's partially because the people who take cruises generally don't go to the theater.
Yeah.
They don't get out much. This is their big deal. They are, and they're seeing the show for free.
Right.
So they didn't pay for it. When they paid for it, they know what they're getting into when they pay for it. When it comes along as part of the deal, they go, "Wait a minute, I didn't sign on for this." Right. And they storm up to the purser's office at guest relations, and they complain, and it's hilarious. And eventually, finally, I think they stopped doing the show on the ship. That's partially because they have to recycle. They have to put in new shows because they get repeat customers. Right. But it was my favorite, because some people I know were involved in the cruise ship production of it, and they said it's hilarious. Every night there's somebody bitching about, "You didn't tell us it was an interracial romance," or "You didn't say there were two guys," or "You didn't, you didn't tell me."
Right.
Like I had to warn you what Hairspray was.
Right. Well, it's a good thing they didn't do a stage production of Pink Flamingos for that crowd,
That's next.
Or Desperate Living, or
don't tempt them. They'll see the title and they'll.
Yeah. Oh, look, honey.
Female trouble.
Right. I mean, I wanted to ask you too. When you were in the time when you were in the cast of Hairspray, were you in it with Kevin Meaney?
Briefly, yes, on Broadway. He came in towards the end of my stint.
Okay.
He came in, and he was doing. There's a part called the Male Authority Figure. He played Mr. Pinky, the hot dog guy, and a cop, and then Mr. Spritzer, who runs the Ultra Clutch, the hairspray company.
Yeah.
And he's also the actor who does that usually understudies Edna.
Oh, right.
And I don't know, because I didn't miss. What can I tell you?
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I was out of the show for publicity reasons or because on tour, not in New York. But so he never. He may have done it. He may have had to go on after I left. I'm not sure, and I don't know how long he stayed.
Okay, because I had read that he was in it and everything, and he's one of my favorites of all time.
Oh yeah, he was great.
I mean,
funny. He was actually he was on Hollywood Squares with me. We had him on.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he was on once, I think, once or twice. We had a lot of people on. It was 6 years, and there were a lot of squares passed through.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I used to love Hollywood Squares. All the incarnations of it, really. A lot of funny stuff on there, and and asking about some of the other things that you've done after that. Speaking of having the kids together with popcorn and pajamas and everything, I grew up in the 70s, and it always seems like my mother knew when there was a special on, because she'd get us our baths early and get us ready to sit in front of the TV. And there was always the Rankin Bass Christmas specials we used to watch. But we used to love we would watch the Donny and Marie and the Brady Bunch specials, and we saw the Paul Lynde Special and the Star Wars, and you were involved with all of those.
I was.
Yeah, tell us about
came in at the tail end of variety television because cable killed it.
Right.
And I came in right before the ultimate death knell. The last show was Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters. That was the very end. That and Pink Lady and Jeff.
I remember that one, yeah.
That was the end of variety. And mainly it was because back in the day, even when you were a kid, there were the three networks. And maybe Fox had started when you were a kid. But there were basically the three networks, and it was an event to see certain performers on television, and so they created events around them.
Right.
And with the advent of cable, it became less and less of an event. And you could, especially for younger acts, I mean, if you wanted to see Madonna, she was on MTV 24 hours a day. So the idea of a Madonna special wouldn't be so special. And HBO would buy her concerts because people wanted to see her concerts, which would never be shown on ABC, with all the editing. And so the form just kind of died. In addition to which, that kind of performing kind of went out. I mean, who's Carol Burnett anymore? I mean, where'd that person come from? Who was that? Who is Carol Burnett in her 20s now? I don't know who it is. I mean, and is there a crying need for that? There's people looking for that kind of thing. Every time they try and put on a variety show, it kind of spurts out after a few weeks. And the last one, I think, was Maya Rudolph and Marty Short. That's the other thing, is that you can't compete with SNL because SNL has got the loosest standards of all of them, so they can get away with a lot of stuff you can't get away with. And nobody wants to do very schmaltzy specials except around Christmas, and then you'll see Michael Bublé out there being romantic and singing songs of joy and light, and Mariah Carey will go to the top of the RCA building and sing something, her song. But the form has kind of gone away. But I was there when, I wouldn't say it was in its heyday, but it was still flourishing. And we got to do a lot of ridiculous stuff. I mean, partially it was because someone like Paul Lynde had written into his contract that he got to do X number of specials a season. And that was because he wanted money, and they couldn't technically pay him that money to be a regular on Donny and Marie, so they would give him specials, and that was how they would get to his number.
Is that right? Okay, that's interesting.
That was frequently done. A lot of people, and it also gave them a chance to spread their wings. A lot of people wanted to to do things they couldn't do in the shows they were on. Bea Arthur was kind of famous for that because she was a Broadway musical comedy actress, and she was playing Maud, and she never got a chance to do any of that stuff. So in her contract, she said, "I get to do a special." So she did. There was a Beatrice Arthur special with Rock Hudson was her guest.
Okay.
That kind of thing. And she did. My most notorious show, the Star Wars Holiday Special, because she wanted to sing a serious song surrounded by a bunch of aliens.
That's great. I remember sitting and watching these shows when I was, like, with my brother and sister, and sometimes my aunt would be there too. I have an aunt that I'm close to in age, and we would always be there with our popcorn and everything. It was just a lot of fun.
Well, they were what was called appointment television. That was the other thing. They fulfilled a social function. It was something that actually got people in the family to gather around the set.
It did.
They were programmed for everybody, and if you wanted to watch it, you had to sit your ass down at 9 o'clock on Thursday or whenever it was airing and watch it, because there was no video on demand.
No, there wasn't.
This was it.
And you couldn't record it back then either, because there weren't really
You
VCRs.
could just start recording them.
Yeah,
And that was another reason why they the specialness went away. Also, in the old days, there weren't that many places where you could see people perform. Now there are like 9 talk shows a day at least.
Right.
9 or 10, and so these people are all familiar. Plus, there are all the entertainment shows, Entertainment Tonight, and Access Hollywood, and Access your ass, and all these things. So they're all over the place. And back then, celebrities were a much rarer sighting than they are now.
Yeah.
TMZ is all about people getting in and out of cars. I mean, they have people staked out on sidewalks asking questions to people getting in and out of cars as they go to restaurants.
Sure.
I mean, so it's a whole different world in that regard.
Yep. I wanted to ask a question. You wrote, the majority of the Brady Bunch specials that were on, and I can remember hearing a lot of stories about Robert Reed having a hard time doing the Brady Bunch because he was this Shakespearean actor. Did he?
Well, he was a real actor, and a lot of he had a very popular show called The Defenders when I was a kid. It was a serious Law and Order kind of show,
right?
With E.G. Marshall, and he was the young sidekick to E.G. Marshall, and he did that, but he also did comedy. He did comedy on Broadway, and so I think when it hadn't happened for him again, and they came along with the Brady Bunch, he took it because he thought he could be funny playing it straight with all these kids running around and all this stuff happening to him, and it worked. But he was not a song and dance man.
Sure.
And what happened with the Brady Bunch was it never went away. I mean, it was after the series was off the air, it kept coming back in different iterations, TV movies and miniseries and all this kind of stuff, because it was always on in reruns somewhere.
Yes.
So there was always another generation that was discovering the Brady Bunch. And one of the things that Fred Silverman, who was running ABC at the time, came up with was doing a show about well, actually, he wanted to do the Partridge Family. He wanted to take the Partridge Family, which was not as popular as the Brady Bunch, and do a variety show with them, because that's who they were in their show. They were a singing act that toured in a bus, and but they didn't want to do it. David Cassidy had gone on to be a big star, and Susan Day was being a serious actress, and Shirley Jones was hoping it would all go away. And so he turned to the Brady Bunch, because the kids had an act called the Brady Kids, which they used to do at state fairs and things like that.
Okay.
And I don't know that they ever had any hit records, but they were a draw. So using that, and the fact that Florence, of course, was a Broadway diva, who knew everything, I mean, the ins and outs of all of it, could do any kind of singing. They approached them with that concept, and they took it. And there was Bob, sort of like at sea. I mean, he was just didn't sing, didn't dance, and all the comedy he did was like reactions to things that other crazier people were doing.
Right.
So he was kind of lost through the whole thing, and so I, of course, immediately I said, "We'll do the one thing that will be surefire. We'll put you in a dress." And so I dressed him up as Carmen Miranda because we did a big tropical finale one week. We were Sid and Marty Krofft produced it. They were very big on finales, and so we had all of these theme things. And I think one of them was old Hollywood, and so we had people doing his various characters, and we put him in a Carmen Miranda outfit, which I've used. I have to say, I've used a couple of times. I did it with Andy Williams in Branson, Missouri, which they loved, and then it went away. But like everything else, the internet keeps everything alive.
It does.
When the Brady Bunch, the most recent thing. Not the most recent. The most recent thing was the house renovation, which I was a part of on HGTV.
Oh, wow. Right.
But before that, the Paramount made 2 Brady Bunch movies, which were parodies of the Brady Bunch. And they were very funny. The first one was a big hit, and the second one was slightly less so. But they were very popular. As a result, everything Brady Bunch showed up on television and the internet, including the Brady Bunch Variety Hour. We only did 9 of them. And I would get calls from people saying, "Dude, I just saw this show, and there's the Brady Daddies and Carmen Miranda drag, and your name is on it." So a whole bunch of people who never knew it existed suddenly were discovering this thing. And of course, I thought it was hilarious, and it is hilarious. But I don't think Bob would have found it as hilarious. But he passed and was not around to enjoy this particular humiliation.
Sure. Did Rip Taylor was a regular on that show?
Oh, he was. Well, we brought him in to play opposite Ann B. Davis, who was Alice the maid, who on the original show had a boyfriend, Sam the Butcher. So we thought we would bring on Rip as Sam the Butcher, but nobody would believe he was Sam the Butcher.
Right.
So because the premise of our show was the Bradys were a show business family now who had a house at the beach with a huge pool with 18 mermaids in it, and they had a television show. And they would go in to do the television show every week. So we had stories that were at home and then carried over to the studio. So there was room for a character for Rip to play that was a show business type. So we made him their publicist.
Oh, okay.
And so he always was coming up with ideas, like he wanted to hang them from a hot air balloon and stuff like that. And, but at the same time, he would be there whenever Ann B was there. He would be there so that she could kind of throw shade at him, and because he was very funny at responding to her. And they had a nice dynamic together.
Right.
Even though they were, I think, highly suspicious of each other. They're like, I don't want to get too much of this on me, whatever it is.
Yep, you got to know the Osmonds pretty well, working on their show for a couple of years, it looked like.
I did 23 of them.
Yep.
I was around, and still do, but unofficially.
Right. And you also, the Paul Lynde Special itself, you had, written that.
The Halloween show.
Yeah,
we did several, but the Halloween show is the one that lives, mainly because it's Halloween.
Yep.
And, anything you do at Halloween that doesn't involve slashers has a big crowd. The Charlie Brown specials come back. Hocus Pocus, Bette's movie, is always around at Halloween because it's a thing that you can show kids.
Right.
And most of the stuff that comes out for Halloween now is, you can't. It's Jamie Lee Curtis running away from a guy with a machete.
Yeah.
So these are the family stuff become perennials, and the Halloween special, which of course was initially discovered long after it aired. It was discovered by people, smoking palm trees while they were watching it. I mean, like every kind of chemical additive, but that's how we made it. We were all chemically altered. I mean, it was the 70s, and there's no shame at this point. I mean, everybody on the thing was like crazy, and I mean, when you consider what we were working, I mean, we had Margaret Hamilton's Wicked Witch of the West and Billy Hayes' Witchy Poo, and then we had Kiss in their first network television appearance.
Yeah.
And they, between all of that, Paul was mostly looking at Gene Simmons' tongue the whole time, wondering if he could rent it.
Oh man,
it was a very festive environment.
Yeah,
very festive to be on that set.
Yeah,
we had a great time doing it. And the funny part is, we thought we were just doing something silly and crazy, and it was no sillier or crazier than anything else. But as I've said many times about these shows, if I'd known 40 years ago that we would still be talking about this 40 years later, I would have paid closer attention.
Right. What was Margaret Hamilton like?
She was adorable. She was very old. This is about the last thing she did.
Yeah.
And she flew in from New York to do it, and she hadn't been in the witch drag in a long time, and she forgot how heavy it was and how uncomfortable with all the green makeup and all that.
Oh, sure.
So she was very quiet, but she would be quietly telling stories about the Munchkins and old MGM days and stuff like that. And she was very sharp. There was nothing off her fastball at this point. She was older, but she was extremely, very, very hip, and she knew exactly what was happening. And I just delighted. Afterwards, a couple of years after I went to visit her, she had this gorgeous apartment in New York in Gramercy Park. And she was fun. She was just a lot of fun.
Yep, I think it was like that was probably around the time she was doing coffee commercials or something. I think I remember her doing that around that time too. Yeah,
she had been not right before, but she was a stage actress, and she toured in the Stephen Sondheim show. She had Little Night Music.
Oh, okay, right.
She did the national tour of that show, and she was wonderful in it. I saw her in Chicago, and she was terrific. And then she went back, and I think that was kind of exhausting. I think she went back to New York and sort of flaked for a while, and because we had to kind of coax her out to do the thing. But I think she was in the mood to get away from home and to kind of, to own the Wicked Witch again.
And how about Billie Hayes, Witchy Poo? I remember her from
Yeah, well, she was my neighbor at the time in Hollywood, and she's a fire plug. A real fire. She was short and feisty, and and full of energy, and kind of like we used to say she was like Mickey Rooney. If somebody had gelded him. She was. I loved her. I had met her. She had done Mammy Yoakum in the musical Little Abner. In the movie, actually, and then a couple of touring things over there afterwards, and so she was very much that type, that tiny Spitfire.
Right. And she
and Margaret were interesting. They were two different energies. Maggie was was not slow, but she was kind of elegant and all that, and Billy was all over the place. Athletic and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, folks, we hope you're enjoying this episode of Fowl Players Radio. We'll be back right after these words.
Hello, this is John Piet,
Kevin Schmidt,
and Jerry Bozick.
And we're August, a little band from Virginia. You can hear our story, other stories from the legendary Baltimore, D.C. music scene, and much, much more with Michael Spedden on Fowl Players Radio. You can find it at www.fowlplayersradio.com, on YouTube, and wherever you find podcasts online. Keep rocking.
Hi, everybody. Dwight Weems from Gaz the Fun Band, and you're watching and listening to Fowl Players Radio.
And you had written some stand-up for Red Fox.
Well, I did, actually. I wrote some, which is unusual. I wrote some clean material for Red Fox.
You wrote some clean stuff, huh?
Well, Red Fox, was filthy, absolutely filthy. And then he became Sanford and Son. And suddenly he was a gigantic star, and people who had never heard him before were discovering him. And he got these tremendous offers to play Vegas and to tour, and he would go places the first couple of dates, and they would walk out. because, again, they said, I didn't sign up for this. I want Fred Sanford, you know. I want the guy, the kind of sanitized guy who I see on Friday nights.
Oh,
and
right.
he was doing his Red Fox's act. So we created a show where he would come out and do new material that was geared to the Sanford and Son audience, which is what I worked on. And then after about 45 minutes of that, he would say, now I'm going to go off stage. I'm going to bring on Miss Lola Falana, and she will entertain you. And then I'll come back after Lola. But when I come back, it's not going to be Red Fox. It's going to be Blue Fox.
Oh, yeah, sure.
So be warned.
Yeah.
And, of course, what the message there was, you've had a full show from him. If you feel like leaving,
right,
you can leave after Lola, because he's going to come back and he's going to go directly into the sewer.
Oh,
and
I've
if
heard
you
that stuff.
If you don't care to follow him, you just check, please, go to your car or whatever. But that was, and as a result, he toured. He did that act for quite a few years.
Right. That's interesting. He like that's almost kind of like almost kind of parallel to the Pink Flamingos thing we were talking about, you know?
Yeah, it actually is. What happens when they become mainstream.
Right. So I've heard that old stuff of his.
They just, an audience is, I've been working with Bette Midler since the dawn of recorded time. And she was, when we started, she was the Divine Miss M, the last of the truly tacky women. A great trashy lady and all that, and she was considered outrageous, and then along came Madonna and other people who took it farther, and then Bette became a movie star. And in the course of doing that, she began recording. She always recorded ballads, but suddenly she had a bunch of big ballad hits, "Wind Beneath My Wings" and "From a Distance" and all that. And after she'd been in movies for 10 years and hadn't worked live, about 25 years ago, we did a tour called Experience the Divine, which was her return to the live stage. And because she was a huge movie star, she played hockey rinks every place. And a lot of people who showed up were expecting this kind of suburban housewife who was going to come out and sing these very sort of lachrymose, sentimental ballads. When she came out flinging her boobs around and doing the stuff that she used to do, they were like shocked.
Right.
Who is this person? And of course, there were always the fans who had never left her would be on their feet cheering and screaming, and the rest of the audience would kind of go, I don't know what's going on, but I'm kind of liking it.
Right.
And by the end of the evening, everything was great. But it was, the first few days were very shocking because there was a whole lot of people who thought that Midler was one thing and didn't realize she was a lot of things.
Yeah. Actually, one of my actors just worked with her in a show called The Politician. One of my murder mystery guys did, and yeah, he said she was delightful.
She's up for an Emmy.
Yeah.
This week. Only we're not sure which night.
Right. Well, speaking
I
of
think
Emmys,
probably Saturday night, because they're streaming the whole thing. They're streaming. They started streaming it last night, every night on the Academy website.
Oh, okay.
And then, because they have 101 categories.
Isn't that something?
And she's up for Best Guest Actress in a Comedy, which is sometimes on the primetime show and sometimes isn't. So they might be holding it for the ABC show with Jimmy Kimmel on Sunday, or they might be doing it Saturday night during the last Creative Arts stream. We don't know. Everybody had to tape their acceptance speeches and send them in.
Yeah,
isn't that something?
Virtual. Isn't that something? I have to keep an eye on that.
Always hilarious.
I'll have to keep an eye on that because the Kimmy versus the Reverend, the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt movie I was in, is up for an Emmy as well. Actually, two of them. One for Best TV Movie, because I guess it's considered a TV movie since it went to Netflix. And the other one is for the Best Supporting Actor for Titus Burgess. He's great. He was very
funny.
Oh, he's hilarious, and he was a really nice person. I obviously being in a scene with him, I had to I spent a lot of time with him and Ellie Kemper when we were filming up there, and it was in upstate New York. It was very it was great. Those two are very nice people to work with, and it was just a wonderful time filming that.
And you were in Gotham also? You did a Gotham?
Yes, sir. I was in Gotham. I played a character named Dale. I was one of, if you watched Gotham,
I watched Gotham for my friend who was the Penguin.
Oh, yeah, Robin Lord Taylor. There was a...
No, not... Maybe he wasn't the Penguin. It was Corey Michael Smith. I forget who he was. I thought
he was the Riddler. He was Ed Nigma.
Oh, the Riddler. Okay. That's why I watched it for Corey.
Yeah, I was in a scene with him. It was towards the end. It was season 5, episode 8. And they were building a submarine to get out of Gotham. And... Oswald Cobblepot comes walking in, and it was in Ed Nigma's laboratory. I came walking in behind him with a tray. I was his big bodyguard that he picked up. And Mr. Penn, Andrew Sellon, ended up coming in with Mr. Scarface, and they shot me. I ended up getting shot. I was like the big dumb bodyguard. My character's name was Dale. And it was in the very last season 5, episode 8, and that was a great experience. That was filmed up in Brooklyn, and Steiner Studios is where we did that.
Yeah, he was in New York for years doing it.
Yep, and those guys were just very, the three of those guys were just wonderful to work with. Corey Michael Smith and Robin Lord Taylor were just a couple of characters too, because those guys they were always cutting up and.
Oh, Corey's great. He's really funny.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy and everything. And so that was that's been out now. I think that came out at the beginning of 19 is when we filmed it right after Thanksgiving in 18. And again, really, really nice guys, really. And he had just had a movie come out too. I can't remember what it was called, but he had just produced a movie.
Corey?
Yes.
Yeah, it was an independent, I forget. It had one of those titles like 1940, 1540, something.
It was a number.
1982, something like that.
Yeah, the title was a number.
I saw it, but I forget. It was an independent, so it kind of came and went.
Yeah.
And then he was in a series with Frances McDormand, the Olive Kittredge. Frances McDormand with not Stephen King, but like that, which is apparently coming back. I think he's done, but and she may be too. But anyway, it was an HBO deal. But enough about him.
Yeah, I had a couple of other questions I wanted to ask. I mean, you were just talking about awards shows, and I think you've got a pretty good collection of awards that you've earned over the years.
I do. I'm looking at my Lucite shelf.
Yep.
It's full of awards and a lot of. I'll tell you, a lot of tributes, but it's all in aid of various charities because that's how they raise money.
Yep.
They give you an award and then they say, "We bet the joke was, we'd like to give you an award. What are you going to sing?" And with me, it's kind of like. We want to give you this award. How many people will be at your table? And can you give us your mailing list so we can get people to buy tables or tickets? And so as a result, you kind of, after you've had enough awards to sate your ego, you say, I thank you. I can't take any more awards right now. Thank you so much. Because you also begin to feel just a little bit less than deserving, A. And B, you also feel like you can't go to the well with your friends all the time.
Right.
Saying, come salute me and spend $1,000.
Sure.
But I do, most of them as a result are from earlier on, but it's very nice to have them.
Yes.
But I've written all those award shows. I am the EGOT of award show writers. I've written
You are?
Emmys, Grammys, Oscars, and Tonys, yes. I'm not the only one, but I am. I'm the only one to point that out.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to get to that.
The others maintain a low profile.
I wanted to ask you if you'd ever written a show in which you'd won.
Yes, a show. I wrote an Emmy show and won an Emmy that night on the show.
Now, were you aware?
For writing an Oscar show.
Now, were you aware that you won the
Emmy? It was
Emmy?
an Emmy show that it was on Fox. The Emmys go from one network to another every year.
Yeah.
And it was a Fox year, and they were doing comedy. So the hosts were Tim Allen, Kirstie Alley, and there was a third, and I can't. Not Paul Reiser, but there was somebody else. Anyway, and we were nominated for one of the Billy Crystal Oscar shows, the one where it was not. It was the second one that we got, I think. And so I was standing in the wings, and they announced my name. I ripped off my credential, handed it to Kirstie Alley, who gave me a hug, and I walked out on stage and accepted the award. And then I came back.
Wonderful, wonderful.
I didn't have to even say anything. Billy was there that year.
Oh, okay.
The previous year, Billy was not there, and we all got to say something. But Billy was there, so he spoke for all of us.
Wow.
But then I came back out, and I had to hunt down Kirstie Alley to get my credential. I'd be thrown out. That's the way it is.
I can imagine writing a show like that has got to be just something it's got to be tough. I mean, not just the jokes, but I mean, I'm sure you've got to be cognizant of, if you're writing bits or skits or sketches, you got to be aware of time, because they're always worried about how long the person's speech is going to be when they accept the award, and then commercial breaks. Is that a challenge for you when you write those?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you plan all that ahead, of course.
Right.
I mean, nobody goes into the thing without a script. So, and there's always what they call spread. You know that people are going to laugh. You know things are going to happen, and so no one gets too crazy.
Right.
But at a certain point, it depends on the show also. I mean, on the Oscars, all that stuff is factored in. On a show like the Tonys, which has a much, much, much smaller audience, the network is very aware of the needs of the guys who run the television station in places like Dubuque, Iowa, where everybody isn't watching the Tony Awards. They're probably watching a basketball game on the other channel. And so if you run past 11 o'clock, you're cutting into their news, which is where they make money.
Yeah, right.
They're not making that much money off the Tony Awards because it's being divided with the network and all that. But the 11 o'clock news is their cash cow. And if you run over and people who tune into the 11 o'clock news don't get the 11 o'clock news and tune out, you're costing them a lot of money. And multiply that by 200 stations who are waiting for the show to end on time so they can start calculating how much money they're making. And you have a very angry situation at the network, because the person who's in charge of affiliate relations is getting 500 calls from people saying, what the fuck is the matter with these people? Get them off the air. And that's why on the Tony Awards one year, they cut off Sean Connery as he was stepping up to give an acceptance speech. He had actually produced a Broadway play, and it won, and it was the last award of the night, and he was, a bunch of producers were up there, and because he was up there, the lead producer, who was not an actor, moved him to the microphone to say a few words, and that is exactly when the show went off the air.
Oh, jeez, a whiz.
So he was like, the poor guy from CBS was on besieged by both sides, because he had the guy calling him from Des Moines, say, you cost me $500,000 because you went over 5 minutes. And on the other hand, he had Sean Connery's people calling, how dare you cut off distinguished Sir Sean Connery? He's James Bond, for Christ's sake. And it was a great scene.
Yeah, I bet.
A great moment in theatrical history.
Oh, I'm sure it was.
But on the Oscars, they know it's going to go over a half an hour.
Yeah.
They pretend it's going to be a 3-hour show, and it never is. And the Grammys go over. I mean, they all tend to go over a little bit, but they get large audiences, and they're heavily invested in the show, so it doesn't matter all that much.
Okay. It looks like you've also been involved with writing some comic relief shows too. I used to watch.
I did all of them. Yeah, like 12.
Yep, and a lot of for those, Billy Crystal and
Dewey and Robin and Whoopi.
Yeah.
Were the hosts. I wrote for them because they weren't doing their acts. They were doing special material just for that show.
Sure, right.
And then they would each come back and do a chunk. That would be part of the show. And so that was principally what I was doing on it. And then if we had funny people doing something other than their own act, I would write that. There were all kinds of little things we threw in, so it wasn't a parade of stand-up. So it was a little bit bigger. We did reunions, like we had a Mary Tyler Moore reunion, Dick Van Dyke Show reunion, famous comedy shows.
Yeah.
And then in between, of course, there are the serious pitches where you get dramatic movie stars to come out, like Sharon Stone, Faye Dunaway, and people like that, to come out and do pitches to get people to send it, because it's a telethon, you know.
Yeah, I had seen a number of those over the years. I'd watched them and everything. And I think I remember seeing the Schmengies on there. Do I remember that correctly?
Oh, the Schmengies were absolutely on, yes.
Yeah.
Well, John Candy and Eugene Levy, right? They were the Schmengies? Yeah.
One of my favorites.
I think they wrote their own, because that was something they developed at Second City.
Oh, yeah, that was the cabbage rolls and coffee polka, yeah.
Yeah, but they wrote one of their own that was like skewed towards the purpose of the comic relief.
Oh, okay, right. Yeah, that's. I remember just and then seeing all the people that came out to perform on that and everything.
It was great, and unfortunately, what happened is that there's charity fatigue sets in, and the homeless don't go away, and no matter how much money comic relief raises, they can't end the problem of the homeless. We now call them the unhoused, I'm told. That is the new politically correct way of referring to people, the unhoused. So it just kept dwindling, and then the last one we did actually was for Katrina. We did it in New Orleans and Las Vegas simultaneously, and it was for Katrina victims, because the show needed a focus.
Yeah.
Because the phones were not ringing when you said this is for homeless people.
Right.
So after that, the management at HBO had a seismic upheaval, and the new people said, we don't want to continue with this. It's not worth it to us to do that. And for a while, we kind of played around with the idea of, Whoopi suggested that we get 3 younger people to host it, and the 3 of them would make like an appearance. But it never caught fire, because HBO really was just down on it, and nobody else wanted to pick it up. And there were so many benefits,
Right.
There are just so many things.
Interesting.
So that's a societal problem. What can I say?
Yeah. How about I know you had worked with Whoopi Goldberg on Hollywood Squares too.
True.
Yep.
I did. Yeah, many years. I was the head writer, and I was at the square to the left of her, if that's possible.
Right. And I mean, so many people were on that show over the years. I mean, one of my favorite ones, and I'm sure you've probably heard a lot about this, was I think Gilbert Gottfried and Penn and Teller were on there. Gilbert was the last square.
That was the best show. Yeah, you fool.
And
that was. I think it was a woman, and she needed. She needed Gilbert Square.
Yeah.
To win, and she kept on disagreeing with him or agreeing with him, and she got it wrong every time.
Right.
And it would come back to her, and she would, and so as a result, there were tons of Gilbert, and every time she would miss it. You fool! And Penn was very vocal. It was very funny.
Yep.
It was very funny. It's hard to describe, but it was really funny when you were watching it.
Oh, it was hysterical.
It's the one that people remember.
It was. Well, I think it was they both, the X's and the O's were both lined up, and that was the deciding one.
I think that was it. It was like maybe Penn and Teller were in one, and Gilbert was in the other. I think that's how it worked out. I forget tic-tac-toe. How is that played again?
Yeah. And then, but the thing is, it was like both people, I think they missed like 8 questions in a row between the two of them.
Yeah, 2 of them. That's right.
Wow.
You're right.
Wow. And so what is
It was a great moment.
It really was. Well, it was absolutely wonderful speaking with you today. I really had a great time, and
okay.
Are there? I know that you have a website.
There's a website called
Yep.
WeGotBruce.com.
Mhm.
There was a movie about me 20 years ago called Get Bruce.
Mhm.
And I'm working on the sequel, Had Bruce, with a much larger cast.
Yeah.
But WeGotBruce.com. It's run by a guy in Nashville, a fan, and he knows what I'm doing all the time. In fact, I check in periodically to see what I'm doing because he knows more than I do.
Right. Well,
But
great.
you can find out all about me, and you can get a hold of me if you want to through We Got Bruce.
Right. Well, wonderful. Well, look, I would really like to thank you for your time today. It was, a pleasure to talk to you. A lot of fond memories of your work over the years, and thank you for those memories.
Yes, you are so welcome.
We like I said, I can just remember, sitting down with my brother and sister and my aunt and watching those things, and just a lot of fun. So
cool. Thank you.
Thank you again for having us. And thank you all for listening. This has been Bruce Vilanch on Fowl Players Radio. And we will chat you all next time. Thanks for listening.
Terrific.